Recording. So this is my presentation over the causes and effects of the American Civil War. So to begin, we're going to talk about, so these are the first original 13 colonies. The ones in pink were considered the North colonies. The ones in the lighter yellow are the middle colonies, and the ones in the darker orange are the southern colonies. So before the Revolutionary War, the northern colonies had a small number of slaves doing tasks such as cutting lumber, hunting for animal furs, loading boats for shipping. The middle colonies had what was considered task labor, where the owner of the slaves would give their enslaved people a task or a list of tasks to do. And once they were done with that task, or with the tasks that were given to them, they were free to go about their day how they would. Some would have, other jobs outside of their slave's home, trying to make money and maybe purchase their own freedom. Some would run their own gardens. After their tasks were done, they had the day to themselves. The southern colonies had what was considered gang labor. This is the worst of the slavery systems, because you would wake up when your owner told you, and you would work until your owner told you were done, and it was usually from dusk till dawn, or from dawn till dusk. Where after the Revolutionary War, the North started to less rely on slavery. The economy no longer served an economic purpose, so it no longer was really a social thing. In the end, a lot of the northern states ended slavery well before it was a national federal thing. The middle colonies, most of them, they no longer were a thing after the Revolutionary War. They either became slave states or free states, depending on how far north or south they were. And the South, they pretty much just doubled down on slavery. It got bigger, and it got much, much bigger. It was the way that they ran their system. That's what slavery was, or that's what being a northern state or a southern state was owning slaves. So as the country got larger, you started to have different systems and compromises coming to end slavery. And the Missouri Compromise was the first of these compromises. So no state above the southern border of Missouri, other than Missouri, would be a slave state. This failed to solve the problem long term, because more land was available above the line than below it, and it angered the slave states. And then after that, there was the Compromise of 1850. No land claimed from the Mexican-American War would be a slave state. And it also added the federal act that all runaway slaves would be returned to their owner, even if they were captured in free states. This failed to solve the problem because it put a cap on half the country, and it didn't allow slavery to move, which really angered the southern states. So this is the map of where the Missouri Compromise line was, and this is where we were getting the land from New Mexico, or from Mexico, which would be New Mexico, Utah, California, after the Mexican-American War, Compromise of 1850. So the economic systems of the North and the South was the North, they focused on manufacturing, turning raw materials into manufactured goods. They relied heavily on railroads, steamboats, and canals to move these goods across the country, mostly going back to the West. And as you see in the map, a lot of the railroad system was in the North, and the ones in the South were mainly to get the goods from the South to the North. In the South, it was slavery, agriculture, owning land and labor. The more land you had and the more labor you had to run this land, the richer you were. They were producing lots of cash crops and raw goods such as cotton, tobacco, rice, and indigo to be shipped north. The political views. So in the North, you had the Republicans. They wanted to limit the spread of slavery in the West. The head of the Republican Party was Abraham Lincoln. This is when you start seeing the real split between the country, because the Democrats, the South, you had John C. Bridgerig, who wanted to extend slavery to the West, where in the North, the Democrats, under Stephanie Douglas, wanted to leave the slave states where they were. He didn't want to expand it anymore. And that split the Democratic Party, which is what led to the Abraham Lincoln becoming the president. So the social life. In the North, family worked outside of the home. They worked in factories, and both women and men worked in factories. Now, they weren't equal, but they did work. Where in the South, you had families working on small farms, growing just enough food and making just enough money to keep their family alive. Most families in the South, actually most families in America, really didn't own slaves. It was only a small percentage, and they were the very wealthy plantation owners from the South. The results of these differences, well, with the differences between the North and the South, in 1861, the Southern states did send Abraham Lincoln the Ordinance of Secession, leading to the split, and that is the start of the Civil War. It was because of these differences, and it was because of how separated the country was, that the Civil War started. And there's the Ordinance of Secession. All right. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Have a good one.